Imagine that you just transferred to your dream college in the middle of the big city. There's always something to do. Getting coffee, studying at the library, hitting the gym, or going out to bars with friends. For one young woman, it was her very first week of classes. She went out on Wild Wednesday for her friend's 21st birthday. They partied until the bars closed. But the next morning, she was gone, and the only clue was a text begging for help. This is her story. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kimbyrleigha. If you've never been here before, it's nice to finally meet you. Today we are unfortunately talking about another college student. This is from my University Murder series, and it's another case that has a lot of reminders and messages, and one that can truly happen to anyone. But before we get in, I do want to thank our sponsor for today. So give me just a minute to do that. So today for my sponsored segment, I received a gift from Lotsa, and it's a mobile slots game that I've been playing for quite a while now. They're currently celebrating their 7th birthday, and this is part of their anniversary giveaway. So I'm excited to open this up. Ooh, a scratch off. So let's go ahead and scratch that off. Okay, I just scratched off. Let's see what prize I got. Wow, I got 165 billion coins, 50 gemstones, and it looks like I even collected a lucky stamp. And I have a little thank you card for being on the app and them celebrating their 7th anniversary. And a cute little keychain, and it's a little slot machine. I have to say, my favorite was the scratch off. I like winning things, I like surprises. If you aren't familiar with Lotsa Slots, it's a free-to-play mobile slots game that you can play anywhere, anytime. And for me, that is when I need to take my mind off of the serious things going on and just escape with a fun game. And Lotsa Slots truly offers an endless array of thrilling slots that'll keep you entertained for hours on end. I love all the sound effects, the colors, and music, and you can download Lotsa Slots at the link in my description box or the QR code on the screen. Plus, you can unlock over 77 million free coins when you download Lotsa Slots using my exclusive promo code, which is Kimber. Just put in the code after signing up and you will immediately boost your chances of hitting your very first grand jackpot, which is, of course, one of my favorite parts. There's new slots being released every single week, so there's always so many new options to choose from, like classic Vegas slots, or maybe you want to try something new. This week I tried the Jackaloot, and it's sort of got a Halloween theme. It has vampires, corpse brides, and ghosts and fiery pumpkin heads. You can play and win anywhere, anytime, and I personally like to play lots of slots when I cannot fall asleep or when I have anxiety. I like Lava Loot and the Piggy Grays, but my favorite game, and the one that I personally play the most and love, is the Bink Oink game, the original piggy game. I love the cute little piggy and smashing the piggy bank open, and of course cute doggies, and I like to win jackpots, who doesn't? Lotsa Slots also has a lot of mini games to choose from, like Space Battle, so you'll never get bored, and that's a great way to earn lots of coins to use in other slots. This one reminds me of a pinball machine, and right now you can join the party at Lotsa Slots 7th anniversary bash. There you can find daily missions, cool mini games, and non-stop raffles for a chance to score up to $3,000 in coins and awesome in-game treats. And if you go to their Facebook page and comment Happy Lotsa Slots 7th anniversary on their pinned post, you can also get an iPhone, AirPods, an iPad, and more. So once again, to download the app, just use the link in my description box or the QR code and my promo code Kimber and get 77 million free coins right now. And don't forget to join the big anniversary event to have your chance of winning $3,000 worth of coins. Have fun, and thank you so much to Lotsa Slots for helping to make today's video possible. I really do appreciate our sponsors so very much. And now let's get into the case for today. Today's case is about a bright, hilarious, and outspoken university student named Jenna Burleigh, who is always unapologetically herself. Jenna was born on November 4th of 1994 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the actual state capital. I know that many of you caught that I made a mistake in another case that I did that was set in Pennsylvania. I do make mistakes sometimes. I said Philadelphia was the capital. I never mean any offense. I just have a lot of information in my brain. and does get jumbled, so just kindly correct me in the comments and forgive me. But back to Jenna. Her parents are Joseph Edward Burleigh, who went by Ed, and Jacqueline Burleigh, who went by Jackie. Jackie and Ed both went to college at Villanova University in Philadelphia. Jackie loved to joke that she was going to Villanova to meet and marry a rich man. But over the years, as she matured, Jackie was more concerned with getting a good education than meeting men. And then she eventually crossed paths with her future husband, Ed, and he swept her off her feet. It turns out Ed wasn't rich, but he was exactly Jackie's type and just as passionate about taking care of others. They were truly a perfect match. Jackie went into hospice care, and Ed did nursing and rehabilitation. They got married on October 26th of 1991, and just a year later, they had their first daughter, Janelle, which is also one of my sister's names. 3 years later, they welcomed Jenna. Here are some pictures. She was a very cute and happy baby. Now, Jenna was part of a large Catholic family. She had 13 aunts and uncles and 13 cousins, as well as 2 younger brothers named Jeb and Jacob, and I couldn't help but notice that all the children have J names like their mother. That's a very common theme, so let me know if you stayed with the same letter for your kids. I'm trying to pick an S name for the new baby to match my daughter, Shyla. But the Burleigh family liked taking trips to visit their extended family in California and Avalon, New Jersey. But their home base was at their house, located at 346 Coddington Way in Harleysville, Pennsylvania, a suburb on the far outskirts of Philadelphia. It's on the far end of a circular road in a cute little neighborhood with lots of pretty homes that had nice big yards. It's a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath home that's close to 3,500 square feet and perfect for a family like Jenna's. When they weren't traveling, the family loved hanging out at home with their dogs, Jay and Coda. Growing up, Jenna was a dog lover. She was an animal lover, and she was as girly as can be. She liked dressing up, wearing pink, and playing with dolls. Dramatic actually should have been Jenna's middle name, because no matter what she was doing, she was the star of the show. You could tell she was going places because of her quick wit and her extroverted personality. On the very first day of kindergarten, Jenna met another little girl named Tori Tornetta. Tori ended up having a little accident, and she had to go to the nurse's office for a change of clothing. And this gave Jenna an idea. Jenna decided she wasn't really wearing an outfit she loved, so she too had an accident, and she followed Tori to the nurse's office so that she could get a better outfit from home. And from then on, they were very best friends. Jenna was actually known for her expressive fashion statements throughout middle school and high school. At first, she definitely tried to blend in like most of us do. She would wear Hollister, Abercrombie, American Eagle, but she had the classic emo haircut. I'm sure you remember the bangs that are always in the face. And she would secretly listen to Panic at the Disco when she got home from school, while still trying to maintain that preppy image. But at Solderton High, Jenna's fashion started to finally reflect her true personality. She wore sparkly rainbow outfits, glittery makeup, graphic tees, tie-dye, kitty ears, chokers, fake fur, heart-shaped sunglasses, crocheted crop tops, and very dark lipstick. Jenna's style could be described as camp, which is over-the-top, exaggerated, and in your face. Her inspiration was hippie music festivals and emo nights, and she pushed her friends to their fashion limits as well. Jenna thought it would be cool to actually go into fashion as a career, but she was also hyper-aware of environmental stability and the problems with the modeling industry. So the fashion industry didn't really make sense for Jenna's life goals because she wanted to make a difference in the world somehow and uplift people's voices who might not have the privilege to do so. Jenna joined the high school film production team, which was called Red Alert, where she made short skits and documentaries. Her talent in filmmaking was obvious. She was creative and passionate. And in 2011, Jenna joined Facebook. And I have to say, there are a number of selfies with the duck face and the peace sign. If you know, you know. I know that I did it too. And her bio read, Millennial Alien Baby. Her workplace says your butt. So you can tell she definitely has a sense of humor. I also noticed she loved to change her hair color. It appeared to be naturally dark, but she rocked blonde and even pink hair. You can also tell from her interactions that she had on her page, Jenna had a lot of great friends. She was quirky, funny, compassionate, positive, and did everything in her power not to conform to society standards. Social media was a place where she could speak her mind on every topic because nothing was off limits. She would share her thoughts on anything from love to self-harm to being whoever you want to be in life and not letting society dictate your path. In 2013, Jenna posted a picture with her little cousin, and she said, quote, "I just want to steal her one day and go shopping," end quote. Kids actually really love Jenna, not only because she wore really flashy and cute outfits, but also her childlike enthusiasm. She carried that same enthusiasm all throughout her college visits and graduation. She even posted pictures in her white cap and gown with her friend Erin Reagan and their favorite teacher at graduation. She also joked about a post she shared about two women who were friends for 100 years, saying that that was going to be her and her best friend Tori. Friends also started to comment about how meaningful the things were that Jenna would share, especially when she began to post things on her own blog site. A lot of times she would share pictures of short excerpts from her journal, and one friend commented that she was already saying a lot of meaningful stuff that many people can relate to, and that it doesn't have to be a novel. Sometimes short and sweet are best. My favorite one was, quote, "Just remember that like the moon, your dark side will orbit, and you'll be full of light once again," end quote. She was very poetic. And in August of 2013, the summer after graduation, Jenna made the decision to relocate for college to sunny Florida, my home state. Jenna was accepted into the University of Tampa, where she participated in sorority recruitment and joined Kappa Alpha Theta. She took classes in film and media studies. She went there to escape, and Jenna wasn't sure if college was even right for her, but she wanted to spread her wings and explore. She went home for Christmas that year, still feeling great about her decision to go to Tampa, since Harleysville was in the middle of very snowy weather. They were calling it Snowmageddon at the time. But sadly, the black ice was horrible. I've never actually experienced it, but Jenna ended up having a really bad accident. She slipped and fell and shattered her ankle. I have shattered my entire right palm when I was 19 years old, and it was brutal, but I can't imagine shattering your ankle because it's on a whole other level. And they had to put screws and plates in, and she had to go to physical therapy to learn how to walk again. This is what the summer looked like for Jenna. So after the surgery, Jenna did have a small chance. It was like a 0.1% chance of getting an infection. But since it was highly unlikely, she decided to return to sunny Tampa and tough it out. The semester started, and guess what? Against all odds, Jenna was the one of that small percentage to get an infection. At the ER, she was given an IV drip and a wheelchair. Ed and Jackie suggested that Jenna come back home and take a semester off so that they could help her out. And I know how hard that must have been for a parent not to be there for their child, so it makes sense. And Jenna's accident completely changed her life. She leaned on her family and friends more than ever before. She started therapy, but it didn't help the fact that she was 19 and couldn't do the things that other people were doing. She couldn't go out with her friends or show off her outfits or have fun. And that spring was when she really turned to blogging. The title of her website was Seeking a Great Perhaps, which I like because it's sort of having lower expectations with the word perhaps, since maybe she would find whatever she was looking for, but sadly, that would become more of a reality than she could have probably imagined. She posted 42 blog posts in 2014, and in those posts, she talked about body image, perfectionism, mental health, student debt, sex, and positivity. She was very vocal about women and how they should stand up for what they believe in. She believed they should be allowed to breastfeed in public, for example, without a stigma, and she wanted to destroy the rape culture. Now, I can't say the R word again and again, so I'm going to sub it with forced intercourse. If you're not sure what is meant by R word culture, let me read you an excerpt from Jenna's blog on the topic from May 2014. It says, quote, "Why does my dad tell me it's different for a girl every single effing time I go out? Because hello, the only reason it's different for a girl is because people keep saying it's different for a girl. You can't get too drunk because you're a girl, and then someone could force you into intercourse. That's the reason. Does no one realize what you're telling girls? You're telling girls they can't have fun the way guys do, because guys will take advantage of them. You know what would be better to do? Teach boys that it's not effing okay to sexually assault girls. You're teaching little girls that it's their fault if a guy forces them into any type of sexual situation because of what they're wearing or what they're doing, end quote. And then she says sarcastically, quote, if they were wearing a short skirt or were drunk, obviously it's their fault that it happened. People seriously put that into consideration like it's an okay way to think. Why in the effing world is it even a little bit okay for a girl to be harmed because of something she was doing, quote unquote, wrong, end quote? This is clearly something Jenna was very passionate about. Jenna cared. And reading her work, I feel like she's speaking to every young girl out there and speaking loudly. She was a very talented writer. And though I don't agree with every position she had, it's clear she thought deeply about the world and her place in it. And that's something that I can get on board with. In April of 2015, Jenna posted on Facebook that SeaWorld should be disbanded because animals should not be enslaved for human entertainment. And in June of 2015, when gay marriage was legalized in the United States, she posted this picture. You've probably seen it before. It's Joe Biden and Barack Obama, and they're running in the White House holding the rainbow flags. Jenna was outspoken about the LGBTQ plus rights and equality. She loved people. And she wanted that to be known that whoever you were, she would accept you. She wasn't going to try to change anyone just because they may be different than she is. And at this time, she was watching the show Orange is the New Black. And she posted on her blog that she wasn't into labels, which is a testament to Jenna's maturity and her free spirit. We're all very dynamic people, so I can understand the sentiment. And while recovering from her infection, Jenna actually opened up an Etsy shop for her tie-dye projects and expanded it into homemade necklaces. I'm wearing this tie-dye shirt I made for Jenna since we definitely shared a love for that. 20% of the sales that she made went to her favorite charity called the Happy Hippie Foundation. This is a charity that's run by Miley Cyrus, and it aims to help the LGBTQ plus kids who experience homelessness. Jenna had always been so grateful to her family that supported her and loved her no matter what. And she wanted to extend that same type of love and support to others. Jenna truly had a heart for those without a place to call home. So she made that one of her biggest missions, to help the homeless. But Jenna could still accept help from others as well. For example, the day after Christmas in 2014, a whole year after the accident, Jenna went to her mother, Jackie, and said she needed help. What she meant was that her mental health had declined and she was in a depressive episode. Her mother heard her and helped her. She helped Jenna go to a mental health facility. She was so proud of her daughter for getting help and being so transparent to all of her friends and extended family members. Jenna had visitors while she stayed with nurses and blogged about her battle with depression, anxiety, ADHD, and what doctors later suggested could be bipolar disorder. Jenna said that her thoughts had turned evil and dark. And she said, quote, "It happens a lot to a lot of people, so I'm not afraid to admit it," end quote. And that's brave, since sadly there is still a stigma around mental health and not being seen as normal when truly we all have dark moments in life. And in February of 2015, Jenna got a much-needed vacation. She flew to the West Coast with her dad, Ed, and her uncle, Chip. And on Facebook, with this picture, she called them her favorite drinking buddies and probably the best, worst influences. You can tell how close she is with her father. They definitely had a special bond. And after that trip, Jenna had the travel bug. She wanted to go everywhere and do everything. Her parents talked about her going back to college to take the next step in her documentary career. So Jenna decided this time she would stay close to home and enrolled in Montgomery County Community College, which was only about a 20-minute drive from her parents' house. Jenna ended up getting her associate's degree there, and from 2015 to 2016, Jenna hung out with all of her friends, Allie, Becca, Erin, Tori, Danielle, Jessie, and so many others. She loved going to music festivals and went to the Philadelphia Folk Festival several years in a row. And one day, she really wanted to attend Coachella. I've never been, but she said the tickets were way too expensive at the time. Jenna loved in no particular order Lana Del Rey, Bernie Sanders, Sylvia Plath, cheese, wine, Disney movies, dancing on tables, and using Snapchat filters. She constantly loved changing her look, as I mentioned, and dyed her hair pink, platinum blonde, and all shades of brunette. And all the while, she advocated for what she believed in: anti-racism, feminism, affordable housing, and of course, combating homelessness. In December of 2015, Jenna posted this, quote, "Facebook friends, it's winter apparently, so I'm going to assume it'll eventually get super cold and shitty, which no one enjoys. But all of us are fortunate enough to have everything we need, even if it's not everything we want. It makes my soul sad that there are people who have nothing. They're forced to live in the cold, and then we wonder why their hearts are so icy. Not all homeless people fall under the stereotype society has given them. It's important to realize we are all living in our own realities. We all have a story that has formed us into the person that we are and has directed us to the place we're at in life. So instead of pretending I cared like I always have, I'm going to finally prove I do, which we all should. What I want to do this winter is make backpacks called blessing bags for the local homeless people in Philly. I've seen people do this, and I think it's the least I can do. That being said, if any of you have any winter essentials to donate, food, toiletries, gift cards, etc., I'd be happy to take them off your hands. I plan to go to Goodwill and other thrift stores to get things as well, but I figured I'd use this site for something actually important. I'll attach a list I found online of what others have included, but any suggestions are welcome. This list doesn't include coats or blankets, which I also want to add. So if you're feeling generous, either comment or message me with anything and everything you can give. Let's start loving, helping, and supporting those less fortunate than us instead of depreciating and disregarding them. Just because it's easier. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." End quote. I know that was long, but I definitely wanted to share that with you. And underneath, she did post an organized checklist, and Jenna's blessing bags were born. Jenna assembled the backpacks on her own and then drove an hour to downtown Philadelphia to hand them out to strangers. In 2016, Jenna posted this selfie featuring the pink, yellow, and blue pansexual flag with the words, quote, "I do not have sex with pans," end quote. She'd recently found out that there was a label that encompassed her sexuality. When she cared about someone, she cared about them regardless of how they labeled themselves. Jenna said that she'd grown. She thought labels weren't for her until she learned that there was a label for her. And I love that. If you're not familiar, because I wasn't fully aware of what this meant, pansexuality is a sexual orientation that describes romantic, emotional, or sexual attraction to people of any gender identity. The prefix pan just means all. And I've actually heard this be referred to as being sexually fluid. And that ultimately means that you look for the qualities that you're attracted to in whatever the gender a person is. You fall in love with them for who they are. And in January of 2017, Jenna posted that she was still growing, but for the first time ever, she finally felt like she was headed in the right direction. She'd gone to a women's march on National Women's Day, and Jenna said the march empowered her. Now she felt like she understood her femininity. It was what made her strong. Jenna said, quote, "I know people feel alone and hurt and scared because I feel it too. Even with my white privilege constantly stapled to my face, I feel it. And I will always fight for what's right. I will fight for intersectional feminism because the whitewashing has to stop. I will always fight for equality for all. And my journey is just getting started," end quote. It's clear that Jenna is a very outspoken and strong woman. As I stated from the beginning, Jenna loved people and wanted to be as accepting as she could. She was the type of person who wouldn't let anyone talk badly about someone else. If she heard someone bullying someone, she would step in and tell them it was messed up and then tell them to accept that person for who they are. We're all different. And in the fall of 2017, Jenna finally had enough credits to transfer to a 4-year university. She did think about going back to Tampa, but it just wouldn't be the same. Besides, she had friends that were now going to college in Philly, so Jenna committed to Temple University. She was a junior at this point, majoring in film and media studies, and she did choose to live with her parents during this transition. She redecorated her room, she painted the walls teal, kind of like this color, and she hung up new pictures and motivational quotes, so it kind of felt like she was in a dorm of her own. Jenna commuted the hour to attend classes in downtown Philadelphia, and I know that a lot of you commute every single day for your jobs. I'm not a commuter. I will not drive in LA traffic or drive that much at all. So I have to ask, what do you listen to on those long drives? Hopefully it's my videos. I know a lot of you have already told me that you do so thank you for that. When Jenna wasn't in class or at home, she worked at a retail job and occasionally slept over at friends' apartments so she wouldn't have to drive all the way back to her parents' house. Now, Temple University had a very big social scene. It's right smack dab in the middle of downtown Philadelphia, surrounded by bars with lots to do. When you're in the Temple bubble, you feel safe. But stepping right outside the campus in Philadelphia, it has one of the highest crime rates in the United States. Crossing that threshold is like night and day. But students felt safe hanging out around town, especially if there were locations that many students frequented. Unfortunately, during her first week of classes, Jenna had another accident. This time, it was in her car. But she was lucky. The damage was minor. She called her dad, and Ed drove to Temple to help Jenna deal with AAA, getting the car towed, and all that stuff. Now, the car would have to be at the shop overnight. That was on Wednesday, August 30th. And the next day on Thursdays, Jenna did have a very early class. But now she didn't have a way to get to school the next morning, and she wanted to attend that class. So she told her dad, you know what? Don't worry about taking me back home. I'm just going to crash on my friend Davis's couch. She had plans to meet her friend Davis Trin and his friends for a mutual friend's 21st birthday party that night. It was the infamous Wild Wednesday, which is a Temple University student tradition. It was Jenna's first Wednesday on campus. She wasn't going to miss it. Now, I wasn't sure whether this was a weekly tradition where students went out on Wednesday nights to kind of celebrate hump day in the middle of the week, or if it was just the first Wednesday when classes start for a particular semester. But when I looked into it, it appeared to be a weekly thing for students at Temple University. It includes bar hopping after classes, up and down the streets surrounding the school, lots of drinking and lots of partying, which is pretty normal for most college cultures. That Wednesday evening, Jenna's dad took her out for dinner, and they had such a good time. Before he left for home, he gave her a big hug and kiss and offered to drop her off at Davis's house. But Jenna said Davis was already out having fun, and she was just going to meet up with him down the street. They said their goodbyes, and she walked away. She turned the corner of the building, and Ed thought about how proud he was of his daughter as he watched her go. Jenna, Davis, and a few of their friends went bar hopping for a few hours. They kept running into another group of Jenna's friends, which included her friend Danielle. I'm sure you know how it is. You go somewhere, you see people you know, then you tell more people to meet up with you at another spot, and before you know it, hours have gone by. Jenna's night ended at a place called Pub Web. It's a sports bar, and it's on a road called Cecil B. Moore Avenue, which is only about a block away from the campus. It looks like a typical bar with a long, skinny counter with a large selection of alcohol, and in the back of the bar, there are some tables you can sit at, and where drunk people usually get brave enough to sing karaoke up on a small stage. And if you're hungry, they do offer burgers and wings to eat. It's a very small bar, and it gets really crowded with all the students piling in. Let me tell you what Jenna and her friends were doing that night. Well, her friend Davis, who she met up with, only had one drink that night, and just before midnight, he left. He told Jenna to text him when she was ready to come back to his place where she was supposed to be staying that night. Jenna stayed out since Danielle's group had showed up, and they just partied and partied till past 1 a.m. Now, the bars close at 2, and this particular one started to clear out closer to closing time. One by one, Jenna's friends began to leave, and somehow there was a mix-up regarding who was taking Jenna to Davis's. But before she knew it, everyone she knew was gone. Jenna was sitting there at an empty bar. She was just finishing up her drink and texting Davis to figure out what is she supposed to do. After 2 a.m., Davis woke up and he hadn't even meant to fall asleep, so he was scrambling for his phone. Jenna had called and texted him. In one of her messages, she asked if David was awake and if she could come over. In another, she asked for help, and that freaked him out. Why would Jenna need help? He texted back, but Jenna never replied. So Davis's anxiety kept him wide awake. He called Jenna back over and over again, but she didn't answer. So then he started calling their mutual friends, hoping that she had found someone else to spend the night with. Not everyone was awake at this time in the middle of the night, but there were a few friends who were awake, and they didn't know where Jenna had gone after they parted ways. By 8 o'clock a.m., when Davis still hadn't been able to get a hold of Jenna, he amassed a search group of Jenna's friends to scour Temple University's campus, hoping that she had made it to class that morning. You don't want to think the worst, and most times you don't. I mean, I probably do from all the cases I talk about, and you may too. But at first, Jenna's friends just expected her to get in touch with them sometime that day and maybe share a crazy story of the night before. Jenna's friend Jesse got a call from one of Jenna's friends asking if he knew where Jenna was. Jesse didn't. So he got in touch with Danielle, and Danielle started looking around for Jenna. She was shocked that Jenna had pretty much been abandoned at the bar the night before. So where was she now? Was she still asleep? Had her phone died? Was she even okay? Or was she in some kind of danger? The anxiety was beginning to build. Because as much as everyone hoped Jenna would be fine, remember that outside of campus, the streets of Philadelphia are not exactly the safest place, especially for a woman to be all alone. Jesse called Jenna's mom, Jackie. She picked up at work thinking Jenna's phone was probably dead, and maybe she was calling from Jesse's phone. When Jackie answered, Jesse said, "Jenna's with you, right?" And at that exact moment, Jackie knew that something was wrong. Jenna was one of those people who always texted and called when she changed locations. She didn't want anyone to worry about her. Jesse told Jackie that she and Ed needed to come to Temple immediately because Jenna was nowhere to be found. This is a parent's worst nightmare, and we already know that Jenna's father had warned her about something happening to women when they go out partying, even though Jenna fought to break the stereotype that it was a woman's job to make sure that she didn't invite bad behavior from men. So this, not hearing from Jenna, would be a living nightmare. Jackie called Ed at work and said their daughter was missing. Ed went into dad mode. He picked up Jackie and they sped down the freeway, not wanting his wife to drive because she was worried sick at this point. Jenna's parents met with the Temple University Police Department. It was 9 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, August 31st of 2017. And recall, it is the first week of school. The officers told Ed and Jackie there was no cause to be concerned, that this happened all the time. Students are free from their parents, they go out, they go on a bender, and they wake up at 2 p.m. the next day with a massive hangover and a wild story to tell. Well, Ed and Jackie insisted this was unlike Jenna. And we hear that a lot. And it makes sense that we do, because if this was normal for someone, then no one would be worried. And it's true that this was Jenna's first week at Temple. But she wasn't the age of most incoming students. She wasn't 18 or even a teen at all. She was 22. She was responsible. And she had already done a lot of partying. This wasn't exactly new to her. The security department agreed to look up Jenna's student card in their system, which would show that Jenna never swiped into the university after the bars closed at 2 a.m. If Jenna did stay at someone's place, they didn't live in a residence hall. But then again, couldn't they have opened the door for her? There were just so many questions about where she could be. An officer actually went to Jenna's midday class, and he waited outside. And when the students and professor filed out of the room, the officer showed a picture of Jenna to each and every one, asking if they had seen her. The answer was no. She hadn't been at any of her classes. Jenna wasn't on campus. And when they called local hospitals, the few Jane Does did not fit Jenna's description. The Temple police helped Ed and Jackie fill out a missing persons report, getting as much information as possible about what Jenna looked like, what she'd been doing the night before, and when she vanished. Ed said that at dinner, Jenna was wearing an oversized light blue sweatshirt. Jenna's friend said that Jenna had that sweatshirt tied around her waist during the night, and she was wearing a navy blue ripped pair of jeans, brown boots, a white t-shirt with the words positive vibes only on it, and her hair was up in pigtails. Now that would be a very distinctive characteristic. It's easier to spot than hair just being down, for example. Captain Edward Woltmate was assigned to the case. He had been working at Temple University for a decade. He learned Jenna was last seen by friends at the bars, which were not technically Temple's jurisdiction, so the Philadelphia police and the Lower Salford PD out of Harleysville were roped into this case. Jenna's friend Davis showed investigators Jenna's text before 2 a.m. asking for help. They also learned Jenna had messaged another friend before 2 a.m. via Instagram DM. She asked to stay the night, and then she asked for help, and that friend was asleep. Detective Terrence Sweeney of the Philadelphia Police Department knew that time was of the essence, and he requested Jenna's CSLI. Now, this stands for Cell Site Location Information from her provider. Unfortunately, the last place Jenna went before her phone was turned off was PubWeb at 2 a.m. on August 31st. It seemed like her phone never left the bar. So what happened? Was she still there? Did she pass out somewhere outside of the bar? That's terrifying. So, of course, officers raced to PubWeb as soon as it opened at 3 p.m., and they asked the employees if they worked the night before, and one of them had, and they recognized Jenna's picture. Her hairstyle, the middle part with the two high pigtails, it made her stand out from the crowd. The manager let police look at surveillance footage, and sure enough, they spot Jenna. Later, they see Jenna sitting at the bar until it closed. She's in a center seat, finishing a drink and texting her friends about needing a place to stay, as we know. At this point, it's about 1:30 in the morning. The bar is empty. Jenna does make a frustrated gesture to her phone because we know that no one's answering. And that's got to be frustrating, especially when someone's been drinking. It's harder to make sense of things and make decisions. Then in the footage, you see a man approaching her from the right around 1:38 a.m., and he kind of leans over and whispers something to her, and then he sits right next to Jenna, even though the entire bar is empty. He could have sat anywhere, and then he seems to buy Jenna a drink. She does engage with him. It appears as though they're having a conversation, even though it's brief, but Jenna keeps looking at her phone, and we know why. She's trying to get in touch with friends so she can get to bed and to class in a few hours. Then the lights in the bar turn on. It's now 2 a.m. and it's time to leave. The man leads the way out, and Jenna follows behind him. They're walking out side by side with only a few feet between them, and they head northwest, around the corner and across the street. Both of them are pretty intoxicated. Outwardly, you can tell this, but they are sober enough that they don't need support, let's say, when they're walking, but they're not exactly walking in straight lines, which makes sense. They just came from a bar and were drinking. But that's all the footage investigators have at this point. So they asked the bartender if Jenna seemed uncomfortable at all, and they said no. Jenna's body language seems open. Plus, the bartender says he knows the man that she left with. He's a regular at PubWeb. His name is Joshua Hupperders, and one of the bartenders even had Josh's phone number. That was perfect. Maybe he saw which way she was headed or happened to help her get to a friend's place. So Captain Woltmate placed a call to Joshua's cell phone around 5:15 p.m., but he doesn't end up picking up at that time. So Woltmate tells Ed and Jackie that they've got a lead, that Jenna was seen leaving a bar with a man, and law enforcement was in the process of figuring out where this guy lived so they could gather more information. Ed and Jackie began to wonder who this guy was, because at this point, they don't know if he's older, if he's a fellow student, and whether Jenna went anywhere else with him after the bar. They wondered if she would have gone somewhere willingly or if he ended up taking advantage of her. It was a lot to take in. And in the meanwhile, they went in person to nearby hospitals hoping to find Jenna without any luck. Ed had a bad feeling. Of course he did, because we know how he feels about men and about women going out and drinking. They were rapidly approaching the 24-hour mark at this point, and it scared him. At 11:15 p.m. that night, Woltmate finally got a call back from Josh. He apologized for not calling back sooner. He had gone out that night before and had been napping most of the day because he was sleeping off a hangover. Josh said that he didn't know a Jenna Burleigh And I mean, we don't know if they even exchanged names. They weren't at the bar very long before they're seen walking out. But he did say he had gone out with his roommate that night, and by midnight, he had had a lot to drink. He was pretty much blackout drunk at the end of the night. Josh said he purchased and drank about $200 worth of alcohol. He was definitely binging that night. That's a lot of alcohol. Wiltmate struggled to believe that Josh could even drink this and remain standing, but he figured Josh probably lost count, or he could be exaggerating, or he bought other people drinks because we saw him buy one possibly for Jenna. It's not that hard because the price racks up when you're spending it on drinks. Wiltmate told Josh he wanted to interview him the next morning since he had been caught on CCTV walking out of Pub Web with Jenna, and he might be the last person to have seen her before she disappeared. So Josh gave his address. Wiltmate wrote it down, and he promised to see him in the morning. So the next morning on September 1st, Wiltmate heads to Josh's apartment, and he realizes it was really close to Pub Web. It's only a few minutes south, but that was interesting because the CCTV footage showed that Josh and Jenna were seen walking in a northwestern direction. So where were they headed? Wiltmate stood outside Josh's apartment and called him. And once again, Josh didn't answer. So Wiltmate left him a voicemail saying, "Hey, Josh, this is Captain Wiltmate again from Temple Police. We spoke last night. Could you call me back as soon as you get this? We're basically down on your block and we like to talk to you, so please call me back." Since Josh wasn't calling right back, Wiltmate and Detective Nicholas Chakula canvassed the apartment, hoping that someone knew where Josh lived. They showed his neighbors a picture of him from his file, and no one recognized Josh. Wiltmate was shocked. He did some digging because remember, he was a local, he was a regular at Pub Web, so people ended up telling him that Josh actually lived at 1708 North 16th Street, not 1608. So he was one digit off, and he wondered, did Josh lie about his address, or did Wiltmate hear him wrong and write it down wrong? Either way, 1708 was a 3-minute walk north and only a minute walk away from Pub Web, almost actually less than a minute. All you had to do was turn the corner, cross the street, and you would be at Josh's apartment. If you're looking at the screen, it's right around this corner. So Wiltmate canvassed that building, which many students from Temple lived in. Neighbors told him that Josh lived in apartment 1R. When you come in through the main door of the building, 1R is straight ahead on the first floor. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom apartment that has bedrooms on the main and basement level. They knocked on the front door and they got no response. Without a key to get in, officers didn't really want to do something drastic like break down the door if they didn't have to, since Josh didn't live alone and they didn't want to do anything without knowing more details. But they knew they needed to get in somehow because they wanted to check for both Josh and possibly Jenna, or if anyone had seen her. Outside the complex was a for rent sign with a phone number on it for the landlord, so they gave him a call. The landlord arrived, and he used a key to open the door. Now, I know what many of you might be thinking. Don't they need a search warrant? Technically, yes, but Wiltmate had already checked the common areas of the complex, hoping he could find Jenna or signs of her or a tenant from that unit somewhere on the premises. However, if they have probable belief that someone is in danger and could be inside a building, they can enter under what's known legally as exigent circumstances. Because what if Jenna was inside and possibly hurt or suffering from something like alcohol poisoning? There was enough probable cause that Jenna needed medical help, and they could enter the home. When you walk in, there's a kitchen area and a living room, and then a small bathroom, as well as a door to the backyard area and a rear bedroom. Then down on the basement level, there's 3 other bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Wiltmate made his way around. It wasn't exactly tidy. There were things all over, which is typical for college-age people. The table was covered in papers, a hat, wine bottle, sports drink bottle, and all kinds of miscellaneous items. There were also things all over the floor, shoes, a plastic bowl, shoe boxes. So he looked in the main level bathroom, all 4 bedrooms and closets, to see if Jenna was there, but she wasn't, and no one was home. But Waltman and Chakula noticed 2 things. A pair of men's Jordan sandals with what appeared to be a bit of blood on the heel area and a toilet paper roll with blood on it as well, or what looked like blood. They didn't have to search through anything to see these items. They were right out in the open and very concerning. After the detectives left, they applied for a search warrant. And since Josh still wasn't answering his cell phone, they were able to get his cell phone data without a warrant. Now, the warrant process for cell phone records usually takes a week minimum, sometimes a month, and they didn't have much time to lose, not when Jenna's life could be in jeopardy. If they could track Josh down as he moved between cell towers, they could pin him down and finally get him in for an interview because that's all they wanted at this point. But I'm sure by this time, word was out that a girl that he'd been seen with was missing. And you'd think that most people would want to talk to police to rule themselves out. But other times people are scared. Not everyone trusts law enforcement, and Josh had reasons why he may not have cared for police. As they looked into him, they found out that Josh Celso Huppers was a 29-year-old born February 27th of 1988, making him 7 years older than Jenna. When Josh was only 4 years old, his father, Octavio, was murdered on the outskirts of Philadelphia. A worker walked into a sewer brick contracting company on January 21st in 1993, and he made a very horrifying discovery. Octavio's body was wrapped in a trash bag. The 5'9", 32-year-old had died from a single gunshot wound to the back of his head, execution style. His arms were tied behind his back, and he was shoved and contorted to fit inside of a garbage bag. This case was never solved. And as you can imagine, Octavio's death was hard on Josh and his family. Maybe this is why he was aloof about getting back to investigators. But in the meanwhile, Jenna's brothers, Jeb and Jacob, busied themselves by making missing persons flyers and hanging them all around campus. The flyer showed a picture of Jenna smiling next to a screenshot of her walking in public on Wednesday night. The flyer read, "Temple student Jenna Burleigh, 22, has been reported missing by the Lower Salford Police Department. She was last seen in the area of Pub Webb on 8/31/17 at 2 a.m., wearing the clothing pictured above." Beneath this was a phone number for an anonymous tip line and the Temple Police Department. Jenna's friends and family passed these flyers out to students, and the university sent out a mass email. Jenna's sister Janelle also made a Facebook post asking anyone with information to please reach out to their father Ed, and it was reposted over 22,000 times. After years of Jenna showing up for her community, the community was showing up for Jenna. On Friday afternoon, on September 1st, a young man named Jack Miley called that tip line. He said that he was roommates with Josh and wanted to provide information about the evening of August 30th. He said that he had gone bar hopping with him with the intention of getting plastered and picking up women. Jack explained that Josh was a former Temple University student that was currently taking some time off, but still living in the area hanging out with other students. Jack said that he left the bars around 1 a.m. and went back to their apartment and slept until about 1 p.m. He woke up with a massive hangover, but when he did get up, he said he saw Josh in the kitchen surrounded by cleaning products. And that's when Jack noticed what looked like blood on the floor and scratches on Josh's neck and a cut on Josh's hand. Well, that's concerning. And Jack said the cut was more like a stab wound. It looked like it went all the way to the bone. Now, of course, you see your roommate like this. He asked him, "What the hell happened to you?" And Josh said that he blacked out that night and fell into a prickly bush. Then the two kind of just joked around about this as another casualty of a crazy night out on town. Jack said that at that point, Josh told him he was just going to finish cleaning up the blood from his wound and then probably go to urgent care to get stitches because it would not stop bleeding. Now, I know this might sound insensitive, but Jack thought it was hilarious. He thought only Josh would get so wasted that he falls into a bush and needs stitches. Jack ends up telling Josh that he was going to go run some errands and then his sisters were coming over because they planned to take a trip to Long Island to visit family for Labor Day weekend. And Josh was like, "Okay, that's cool, but please don't let anyone use my bedroom," which is pretty normal when your roommates are going to have people over. And this is also maybe why Josh wasn't answering because it was a holiday weekend. But all this sounded very alarming. Was Jenna with Josh when he allegedly fell? Did they part ways? And when did all of this occur? And why was he just getting stitches the next afternoon? So once Josh left for urgent care and Jack went and did his errands, he said he came back with his sisters, but he didn't listen to Josh. He gave them free reign of the entire apartment, including access to Josh's room. So much for an obedient roommate, but nothing was seen that was out of the ordinary. Jack called Josh as he left for New York, saying that he was now headed out of town. Now, Josh actually told him he too was out of town, visiting in North Carolina. Now, Jack did think this was a little weird because he had never heard Josh mention that he had family or any business going to North Carolina. So once Jack saw the reports that this woman, Jenna, was missing, he didn't know what to make of his roommate Josh's story, and that is why he called in the tip line. I'm going to pause here to point out a few things. First of all, I'm assuming Jack called in because he thinks something could have happened to Jenna, considering we've got blood, we've got Josh's hand that needs stitches, but this story kind of implies, if he's saying that Jenna could have been hurt and that's why he's calling in, it implies that Jenna was over their apartment in the early morning hours of August 31st when Jack was already in bed. And he doesn't hear anything? Is that odd? Secondly, Jack let his sisters into Josh's room without permission, but there wasn't anything off about the room to cause them to be concerned. And third, Jack left right afterward out of state. See, everyone's a suspect until they're not, so the investigators wondered if Jack could actually be involved, and maybe he was calling in this tip to get the police off his back. They wondered if he was making up a story about Josh skipping town. Well, he skipped town. For all the police knew, maybe Jack had those injuries, since all they were relying on was his call and his words. But maybe he was an upstanding citizen, and his tip was evidence. They needed to do more digging, but this was all they had right now. So Detective Womack caught wind of Jack's tip and called Jack to ask him himself about what he had saw. And then after they finished talking, he asked Jack to call Josh and ask him about Jenna and her disappearance. Well, Jack must have called because on 4:10 p.m., September 1st, Josh calls Walt May back. At this point, the detective asked him if he's in North Carolina, and he says no, he's not. He didn't know what Jack was talking about. He said, I'm in South Philadelphia, and that he just woke up for the day, which is why he missed the earlier calls. He told Walt May he wasn't that far away, and he promised to meet at Temple Security Department at 5 p.m. That way, they could sit down, they could talk, and he could provide them with any information he could. Walt May waited, but Josh never showed up that night. But that didn't matter because his phone records had come in, meaning more departments were about to get involved in this case. I'm talking the FBI, the Honesdale Police Department, and Pennsylvania State Police at Dunmore Barracks. Now, Dunmore is in Lackawanna County in northeastern Pennsylvania, and Josh's phone was pinging in Paupack Township in the Poconos Mountains within 45 minutes of Dunmore. This means he could have lied about being in South Philadelphia. And all of this was making Josh look pretty guilty. Not saying where you really are causes some red flags to go up. So the FBI provided the address where the police could find Josh. Corporal Benjamin Clark headed to that property where Josh's phone pinged. There was a wooden cabin on a lakefront property. It's really nice, and it's part of a gated community on Shore Drive. Records showed it belonged to Josh's grandmother, Inez de Bolito, and it was the perfect isolated place to relax, hike, fish, and hang out on a family holiday weekend. Clark knocked on the door Friday evening, and nobody answered. He did consider going inside, but instead he decided to wait in his car, and he didn't have to wait long, because Josh ends up pulling up with his grandmother. In the driveway, he told Clark that he's already talked to police. He didn't know Jenna. He already let them know that he couldn't help them because he doesn't have any more information. When Clark asked Josh why he was out visiting his grandmother's house, Josh said it's Labor Day weekend. He had a heavy fall semester at Temple, and this was his only weekend that he really had time to go visit. But we already know he's not a current student. So why is he being so evasive? It's not normal, but we know his father was murdered, so maybe he held a grudge against law enforcement. But Clark started to size up Josh's appearance, and he noticed those stitched up cuts on Josh's hand and that there were scratches on his neck. So, of course, since Clark had him with him there, he asked Josh what his injuries were all about, and Josh said, "Oh, these scratches, they're from earlier in the week. He hooked up with a woman named Vicky from New Jersey, and he said the cuts on his hand were actually from a cereal bowl." So wait, what about the fall in the bushes? Now it's a cereal bowl. Interesting. Josh explained that when he got back from the bars in the morning of August 31st, he made himself some cereal to eat, but he was blackout drunk and he passed out, shattered the bowl, and cut himself on the pieces. Now, this was an entirely different story than the one his roommate Jack said about the bushes. So either Josh was lying or Jack was lying. And maybe they're both involved in Jenna's disappearance. Clark requested that Josh return with him to Dunmore. So Josh went with his grandmother to the police station where officers took photographs of him and his injuries. And they waited for the Philadelphia police to arrive. If you're watching, here's what Josh looked like that night. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a gray sweatshirt. I was trying to make out what it said on it. It looked like it said second class and then something officer association. He's also wearing a pair of dirty looking sneakers without laces in them, just the Velcro straps. You can kind of see the band-aids on his right hand in this photo. So they had him remove his outer clothing and strip down to only his underwear. I noticed at this point he had a chest tattoo, and it's a phrase I've seen many times. It reads, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." This is an inspirational quote I've seen many times about not giving up. He's got another smaller tattoo on his upper left chest area above his bicep and one across his right shoulder. His body really doesn't appear to have any significant injuries on it. However, when you get up close, you notice that there are some pretty nasty scratches on his lower left chin and neck area. They don't appear to be loving marks. I mean, I understand a little passionate scratching, maybe down the back or something, but these look like defensive wounds, like someone was trying to hurt him and push him away, especially if the person was right-handed and clawing at him. But now, let's look at his right hand. Bunch of cuts and gashes. I mean, one of them is, of course, deep enough for stitches, and they look bad. They could be from a fall, or maybe that ceramic bowl, but they could also be from a knife with the way that they look like sliced and punctured, and they look fresh. A detective took Josh in for further questioning, and finally, the search warrant for his apartment went through. And Detective Sweeney looked throughout Josh and Jack's place from top to bottom. From first glance, it was a messy college kid's home. But as you really examined it, there was blood in places where it shouldn't be, which was swabbed for DNA. First, there was blood on a light blue broken ceramic bowl. That's interesting. So was Josh being honest? Maybe, but maybe not. Because the blood wasn't on one sharp broken piece like it had cut him. Instead, it was splattered across the broken bowl, which was lying on the floor. It's almost as though someone had bled onto it. But who? Josh? Or was it Josh and Jenna? There was also blood on the right of the kitchen sink, as well as a knife close by. More blood droplets were on the lid of the trash bin, and a blade of that blunt kitchen knife, and a futon, toilet paper, and a toilet paper roll, strips of gauze, the pair of sandals on the back door, and several pieces of clothing all looked like it could belong to Jack or Josh and had blood on them. But it was when they found a black hair tie that was the first indication that maybe a female had been there. But we know that Jack's sisters were there. And also it wouldn't be that unheard of if Jack or Josh had brought girls home on a regular basis. They were still looking for signs that Jenna had been there. Next, investigators found paperwork from Josh's urgent care visit and drugs. I don't just mean some painkillers to help with his hand. No, there was a lot of drugs. There were narcotics and painkillers like Xanax, marijuana, but I wish you could actually guess how much marijuana was in this apartment. It wasn't just an ounce. It wasn't 2 ounces. It wasn't just a gallon-sized bag. No. There were nearly 15 bags, the size of pillowcases, full of weed in this apartment, and it was worth thousands of dollars. What's more, they found $20,000 in cash. This wasn't your normal drug dealer. This was a guy or two guys that serviced pretty much the entire Temple University community. And okay, that is one kind of crime, but investigators are still searching for Jenna. And that is when they looked inside the trash bin. And this case went back in that original direction because they found a light blue sweatshirt, a sports bra, and a white shirt that said positive vibes only. Jenna's clothing that she had been wearing last. Why would Jenna's clothing be in his trash? Well, investigators can think of many reasons, and none of them are good. They hadn't found a murder weapon per se, and they didn't know where Jenna was. But Josh had withheld evidence. Therefore, he was arrested at 9 p.m. that Friday night. I know I already told you a little bit about 29-year-old Josh. I told you about how his dad was murdered and how hard that was on him and his family. After high school, he went to Lackawanna College where he sold drugs and faced the consequences. So that wasn't a new thing to him. And in September of 2012, he was charged with public drunkenness and misconduct. And in October of 2012, he got a DUI, possession of drugs, with the intent to deliver. Then he got a second DUI that same month. And in July 2013, he was charged with burglary while under the influence. Josh had broken into someone's home and stolen electronics, credit cards, even laundry detergent, and a half a keg of beer. He was given 2 years of probation. And during probation, in July of 2014, he was under house arrest for yet another DUI. That fall, he transferred from Lackawanna College to Temple University, where he was an on-again, off-again student, studying advertising and risk management. I'm telling you this because Josh was the most logical culprit for investigators. I mean, he had a history of lying, dealing drugs, reckless driving while intoxicated, and violence in connection with his addictions. When police were canvassing his apartment complex, neighbors gave Josh a pretty bad review. 29-year-old Josh and his 24-year-old roommate Jack had moved in that past month, even though they had been friends for a couple years. They were arrogant partiers. One woman, her name is Sharmila, she said that Josh was a friend of a friend, and they'd hung out together in large groups, and that Josh acted narcissistic and arrogant in front of other men like he was competing with them. He even offered to sell her drugs and verbally harassed her and her sister. Definitely not good signs. Another woman named Natalie, who lived right across the street, said Josh was friendly but gave her a bad feeling. He'd also offered to sell her painkillers and weed and was always inviting her to come hang out. She declined. And now that he was being investigated in connection with a missing woman, she really started thinking that that could have been her. And that was scary. She said about him offering her drugs that, quote, "It was actually a really common thing. Almost every time I saw him, he was always outside smoking, and he would always ask me, and I would tell him I don't smoke," end quote, referring to weed. And Natalie also said that since he knew she was a soccer player from Yardley, he would brag to her about how he also played soccer for Temple University and he was on their varsity team. And recently, Josh made up this story about how his dad was a professional soccer player. Well, Natalie knew that all of this was a lie. She didn't know that Josh's dad had died or was murdered, but she did know that Josh wasn't going to Temple, that he had taken time off that fall semester. But remember how Josh told Detective Clark he had a really busy semester? They were lies. And there's nothing stopping a liar from lying again. Natalie had also seen Josh get into an altercation with a woman who burst into his gate. They were arguing, and then she punched him. Natalie said she had no idea who this woman was, but she had heard screams, so she ran outside that day to find out what was going on. Now, this was not in connection with Jenna's case because it happened weeks before, but none of this looked good for Josh, who was still in custody at the time, but they still had to figure out what he'd been doing for the last 2 days. Where was Jenna? And is his roommate Jack involved at all? The next morning on Saturday, September 2nd, Josh's stepfather called the police with another tip. He said that Josh came to visit on the evening of August 31st. Josh's mom and stepdad lived in a house in Jenkintown, another suburb of Philadelphia, about 25 minutes away from where Josh's apartment was. Josh's stepdad said that Josh stayed the night before he took a Lyft ride to his grandmother's house. So police filed search warrants so they can investigate the houses of Josh's mom and his grandmother, two places they know he's been. Next, Detective Edward Capel of the Philadelphia PD reached out to Lyft's security department. He was hoping that they had some kind of records of this ride. Now, Lyft told them that on September 1st, Josh had requested a ride from Jenkintown to Hawley, Pennsylvania, which is a borough near Powpack Township. This is where Josh's grandmother's house was. Josh's driver was a man named Avery Tucker. But what was strange is that the record showed that that ride had been canceled. So the detective met with Avery Tucker, and Avery said that when he went to pick up Josh actually convinced him to cancel the Lyft ride confirmation and shut off the app. Then he offered Avery $200 in cash to drive him from Jenkintown to North Pennsylvania. Now, this was more than he would have made if he used the app, since he wouldn't have to split the money with Lyft. So Avery agreed. Then he said he watched an older man helping Josh load a large plastic bin into the hatchback of his car. That's super suspicious. And this was a 100-mile drive, about 2.5 hours, and Josh fell asleep along the way. Once they got to Josh's grandmother's property, Josh actually asked Avery to help him unload that plastic bin from the back of his car. Avery told investigators it was a large, opaque, kind of navy blue plastic tote with gray or silver colored handles, like you might see in a garage to store your Christmas decorations or Halloween costumes. Avery said he lifted his side of the plastic tote, and it was very heavy. He even made a joke to Josh saying, like, "What do you have in here, bricks?" And Josh said it was school books. So Avery set the tote down in the driveway, and he left. That's all he knew. When all of this information was being provided, Jenna had been gone for over 48 hours. Detectives were scared of what this meant. If Josh was bringing a heavy plastic container to his grandmother's house, was he trying to get rid of evidence? And did he succeed? And when I say evidence, I think you know what it could be. On the morning of the 2nd, the police followed yet another clue: the urgent care paperwork. They met with a practitioner named Matthew Montagna who treated Josh for a hand injury on the 31st, but Matthew wasn't able to reveal any new information. Everything they already knew from the paperwork was relayed to them. Then after 9 a.m., the Pennsylvania State Police got a call. It was from a man named George Stapolito. This was Josh's step-grandpa. He was married to Josh's maternal grandma, Inez, the one that Josh had visited. Josh said on the phone call that he finished breakfast that morning and planned to go do some yard work for the rest of the day. Well, there was a white equipment shed near the lake on their property, and George was checking it out to make sure there weren't any snakes inside. He confirmed, no snakes. But there was something new in there, a large blue storage bin. Not knowing what it was doing in the shed and what was inside, George decided to open it. He said he saw a blanket folded just beneath the lid, and underneath that, he found the remains of a human body. It was a young, dark-haired woman wearing no clothes, and her skin was a yellow color. Wow. It is just unreal. I can't imagine finding a deceased human being, especially like this. It's unimaginable. So obviously, investigators believe this had to be Jenna. It actually makes me nauseous to think about what a small space that is and how long it took to find her. Josh had lied about there being books inside this tote. He lied about a lot of things. He was covering up a crime, and from the scratches on his body, he had something to do with it. The search warrant for Josh's family's home in Jenkintown didn't come back with anything new. However, inside his grandmother's cabin, there was a navy blue zippered bag similar to like a man's purse containing basic clothes, underwear, socks, t-shirts, toiletries, and it didn't belong to George. It contained $3,000 in cash. Josh had already left Philadelphia. So did he plan to leave the entire state of Pennsylvania and just disappear? They seem to have caught him just in time. They may have never found Jenna had it not been for all these tips. As I've said before, if you see something, say something. It's so important. So at 10:49 p.m., Josh tells Detective Joseph Murray of the Philadelphia Police about his whereabouts the last few days. Now, at this point, he doesn't know that a body has been found. So here he is saying that on August 31st, he went to urgent care. He was stitched up. He got that cut from his shattered cereal bowl. And then he said that evening, his cousin Eric Carlson came over, helped him move a few things, including a plastic tote full of old books and things to bring to his mom's garage in Jenkintown. Then on the 1st, he paid a Lyft driver to take him to his grandma's house. Josh didn't admit to anything sinister, but it didn't matter because they had all they needed. He was charged with murder and abusing a corpse and tampering with evidence, but he planned to plead not guilty to all counts. He requested an attorney, which is his right, but allegedly he was told he couldn't have one, but I'm getting much too far ahead of myself. On Saturday morning, Ed and Jackie were at their home, and their house was packed with their extended family. For all they knew, Jenna was still out there, but they were losing hope. And that's when Ed got a phone call from the Philadelphia Police Department requesting that he and Jackie come down to the station. They didn't know whether this was going to be good news or bad news, but wanting to speak in person is a sign that it's probably not good. When they arrived, Jenna wasn't there, and Ed and Jackie's hopes were shattered. Officers confirmed that they believed they had located Jenna, and she was no longer alive. Though they still needed an official confirmation through an autopsy, the woman they found matched her description, and an arrest had been made. Ed, of course, wanted to know every detail, and so would I. Jackie wanted everything to be over. They could not believe that this was the reality. When they got home, Jackie went straight to her room. After spending almost every day with her daughter for 22 years, she couldn't face anyone but her children and her husband until she could process all of her emotions. I'm so sorry, because as a mother, I can't think about how heartbreaking that could be. And that Saturday evening, Ed posted Jenna's picture on Facebook with the words, quote, "Our beautiful angel Jenna is now in heaven. Now I know for sure that you can have a broken heart. R.I.P. honey." End quote. And I feel so bad for her family. By then, all of Jenna's friends knew she was gone. Her best friend from kindergarten, Tori, screamed with grief. Aaron couldn't stop crying. Jesse said he didn't realize how much hope he had until it was all gone, and the empty feeling crushed him. Of course, Davis felt guilty, knowing that he had been out with her that evening. But it wasn't his fault. It was only her killer's fault for choosing to take Jenna's life. Jenna's autopsy was on Sunday, September 3rd in North Pennsylvania. She was examined by Wayne County Coroner Edward Howell, as well as a Philadelphia medical examiner. Her manner of death was ruled a homicide, and her cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma to her head. Now, this is not going to be easy to hear, so I would suggest skipping a little ahead if you don't want to hear the details of the way a person has been killed. Jenna had bruising and lacerations all over her torso. She had been hit 28 times with what they believed was probably a fist, causing bruising to her neck, face, and her upper chest area. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms from trying to hold off her attacker. Jenna was actually bitten on her right arm and stabbed in her left arm with a sharp object that could have been that kitchen knife. She had been hit over the head with a hard object, causing a laceration on her head as well as head trauma. Because of the cuts, it was determined that that broken cereal bowl at the crime scene was actually one of the weapons used. Also, Jenna had been strangled, and it looked like it had been done with a person's hands. It was so forceful that her larynx, the part of the throat containing the vocal cords, was broken. Since she had been found without her clothing, examiners did clippings of her fingernails, as well as oral, vaginal, and rectal swabs. As you probably know, DNA takes months to process, so they had to wait on those results as well as her toxicology report, which could take 6 to 8 weeks. But the investigation wasn't over yet. Philadelphia police returned to Josh and Jack's apartment one more time. They wanted to find out more, and one of the neighbors said on August 31st around 4 o'clock in the morning, she heard a woman screaming from apartment 1R. The woman sounded scared and in pain, and this surprised officers. From what they gathered, Jenna did go back to Josh and Jack's apartment, but that was around 2 a.m. And before that, she had called her friends asking for help to get home from the bar. So did this mean that she was uncomfortable with Josh before going home with him? Or was she just really trying to get home, and that's what she meant by she needed help? They figured she probably left with him because she felt like she had no other choice. In that case, why would 2 hours pass in silence before this neighbor heard a scream? Did the neighbor get the time wrong? Or maybe things escalated. Now, it did appear there was another cereal bowl with some cereal left over in the sink. Could they have gone back to Josh's, hung out normally, ate together, and then something changed? To find out more, investigators looked at surveillance footage they got from outside Josh's apartment. Sure enough, they see Jenna and Josh walking with about 2 feet between them. And then they enter Josh's home at 2:32 a.m. Jenna never leaves. They never see her reemerge from that front door or walk down the sidewalk anywhere in front of the building. I think we know why. Around 6 p.m., a person they have not identified at that point knocks at the door. At 7:09 p.m., he and Josh struggle down the stairs, carrying exactly what you expect: the blue plastic tote. Josh already said that it was his cousin Eric Carlton that helped him move the tote to Jenkintown. So was this that guy? Investigators tracked down Eric and they talked to him. Eric said that he and Josh had been friends ever since they were young. Eric's uncle married Josh's mom, and they were only a year apart, so they got along really well. When their parents ended up getting divorced, they kept in touch, mostly because Eric actually bought weed from Josh. Eric and Josh talked that afternoon, and Eric came over to Josh's so they could hang out and smoke. When he arrived at Josh's place, he found him cleaning up blood. This was hours after Jack had encountered Josh doing the exact same thing. So there must have been more blood than what investigators saw when they searched the place. Eric said he asked Josh what happened, and Josh said he was drunk and he was trying to open a beer, and it shattered and it cut his hand. So this is now what, the third story that he's told about this cut? So Eric told investigators that he and Josh smoked in the apartment. And then Josh asked Eric to drive him to his mom's place and to help him move a tote of books into Eric's car. He remembers saying, "Dang, this is heavy," wondering what kind of books Josh was reading. Then Eric did drive Josh to Jenkintown. If Eric wasn't knowingly involved in Jenna's murder, investigators assumed the same situation for Jack. CCTV footage showed that Jack entered Pub Web with Josh on the night of August 30th and left at 1 a.m. on August 31st, exactly when he said he did. As for skipping town, the Long Island trip was a pre-planned vacation. Jack's family had made Labor Day plans long before the semester even started. If Jack's sisters had gone into Josh's bedroom while Jenna was still in the apartment, it's probably because she was already inside that blue tote. The only question was, why hadn't Jack heard anything? The walls in this apartment building were thin. A neighbor heard screaming at 4 a.m. So what are the odds that Jack slept through a murder? It's not unheard of if you're passed out drunk and you live in a noisy neighborhood. But on September 7th, a week after Jenna's death, a vigil was held at Temple University in the Founders Garden. Even though Jenna hadn't been at Temple for a long time, hundreds of students showed up to support her friends and her family. In the middle of the garden, visitors were invited to write notes around a picture of Jenna smiling with one of the puppies from an animal shelter. The clothing store where Jenna worked ended up selling clothes in Jenna's honor, and her friend from Harleysville started a GoFundMe that raised over $5,000. Jenna's viewing was that evening, and her funeral and a Catholic Mass were held on September 8th, where the family asked that in lieu of flowers, all donations be made to a memorial fund, and all that money raised was going to help Jenna's blessing bags for the homeless. Her mother and father felt like Jenna would want to keep that charity going. It was the perfect opportunity to share her story, spread love, and make a difference in people's lives, and that is what Jenna would have wanted. At Jenna's funeral, the pamphlets contained one of her signature quotes. It said, quote, "I don't care about my outward appearance. because it's the least that matters. What really matters is your insides, your soul, your mind, your thoughts, because your body is just a physical vessel of what's really important, and it's also extremely temporary. My soul will go on to live lives and lives, move from worlds to worlds, and have experience after experience. My body is just keeping me together in this reality, which is fine, as long as you understand your greater purpose and that your true self can't be found outwardly, but must be searched for inwardly, end quote. I think that what she said is very profound, and I truly hope that Jenna is exactly where she wants to be. In the year and a half following her murder, the district attorney's office did everything in their power to find justice for Jenna's family without having to go to trial. They offered Josh a 30 to 60-year sentence if he just chose to plead guilty to all counts, but he refused. He maintained his innocence. He said it wasn't him. Because of this, he faced life in prison, since capital punishment rarely happens in the state of Pennsylvania, and the trial began in 2019. Jenna's friends showed up wearing cat ear headbands in her honor. Jackie stayed strong, and Ed vowed that no matter what pictures or videos were shown at trial, he would sit and watch it all, staring Josh down the entire time. In opening statements, Assistant Prosecutor Jason Grenell speculated that Jenna went back to Josh's willingly and had sex with him. Now, I'm going to get to the evidence and my thoughts in one moment, but it's speculated that when Josh proposed that she had anal sex with him, Jenna resisted, and she was no longer having fun and wanted to leave. We know that Jenna was a strong-willed woman. She stood up for herself and others, and if she didn't want something, she would let it be known. That is when it's believed that Josh became forceful, and Jenna fought back, and probably tried to run from the apartment, which resulted in a violent fight for her life on the kitchen floor. Josh didn't just injure her, he used every means possible to take her life and her dignity. This also makes me believe that the sex was never consensual at all. These are just my 2 cents from reading everything I have. I think all she wanted was a place to go until her friends were able to come get her. But Josh had other plans. Like his roommate said, their intention that night was to get wasted and pick up girls. There was definitely a struggle, no matter how it started. All the blood and the fingerprints on this crime scene, including the shoes, the kitchen knife, the trash can, and the plastic tote, belonged to Josh or Jenna or both. Josh's DNA was beneath Jenna's fingernails. His DNA and semen were found in all 3 places that medical examiners had swabbed: her vagina, mouth, and rectum. The evidence was overwhelming that they engaged in intercourse, but as I stated, I don't think Jenna was consensually having sex with this guy. If it wasn't forced, it was under extreme influence of alcohol. First of all, we know she was drunk, and after the toxicology report came back, it was found that her blood alcohol level was 0.238. That's about 10 drinks, well past the legal driving limit. At this level of toxicity, many people struggle to even walk. Some people black out, and less experienced drinkers are at a risk for alcohol poisoning. Just because one person or both are drinking or drunk, it does not mean that they were both willing. Secondly, Jenna was asking for help from her friends before she even left with Josh, meaning she didn't truly want to go home with him. Was she coerced? Did he act kind, like he was helping her? And what time did all this happen? We will never know. But it's no question that Josh was there when Jenna was murdered. Josh's defense attorney, however, David Nenner, gave a different perspective of this story. He said, it wasn't Josh at all. It was Jack Miley, Josh's roommate of just 1 month and a student at Temple University. He was the one responsible for the murder, and Josh covered everything up because he felt responsible. What? So the defense said that Jack has this history of violence when intoxicated, and one time he got physical with a man at 7-Eleven after drinking. So he was arguing that this meant he was capable of violence against Jenna. But let's not forget about Josh's record. In the defense's point of view and argument, they said that Josh came on to Jenna. They got in a fight because Josh wouldn't take no for an answer. So there you go. Even the defense is admitting that she resisted from the start. And then the two argued. The defense said that Jenna still drunk, took a knife and sliced Josh's hand. They said then Jack woke up from all the commotion. He went into the kitchen and he found who he thought was an intruder in his home who had just stabbed his roommate. So he intercepted. He allegedly pushed her down the stairs and strangled her once she was at the bottom. This is quite a story. The defense attorney warned the jury that the prosecution might show them a text between Josh and Jack where Josh admits that he murdered a woman while he was blacked out. Oh, that's interesting. So what's the excuse? Well, his defense attorney argued that Jack actually forced Josh to send him that text after Jack killed Jenna. And Josh was so scared of him, and Jack threatened to harm him and his family if he didn't cover up all this crime and all the evidence. So for that reason, Josh changed his plea. He was now pleading guilty, but only to tampering with evidence and abusing a corpse. He wasn't pleading guilty to murder. He was pleading not guilty. Come on. If you were on this jury, what would you have done? What would you have made of this story? After the first day of trial, Jenna's father told the group of reporters that he felt thrilled with the prosecution's efforts and asked them to support Jenna's blessing bags. The next day, witnesses called to the stand were Courtney Miley, which is Jack's sister, and she testified that Jack was a deep sleeper. She said if Jack was drinking or even smoking weed, there could have been 1,000 elephants stampeding in the room, and he would have slept through it. Now, I found that hard to believe until I actually heard Jack's testimony. I actually try my hardest to put myself in the jury's position and hear all the evidence before I make my own opinion. But on the witness stand, Jack told the jury the full truth of August 30th. When he went out to Pub Web with Josh, he was very intoxicated. He said he consumed 1 milligram of Xanax, which you probably shouldn't mix with other substances, and a large amount of weed, 6 shots of liquor, and in his words, 12 to 15 beers. This is a dangerous mix, and Jack was not in his right mind. He said when he left the bar at 1 a.m., he went home and he passed out and went to sleep on his bed. With that amount of depressants in your system, it is possible to sleep through almost anything, even a murder. Also, remember how Josh told Jack that he was in North Carolina when Jack was on his way to Long Island? Well, the next day, Jack called in his tip to police. The detective called Jack to ask him to call Josh. Remember this whole story? Jack told the jury that he called Josh 3 or 4 times before Josh picked up. And when he told him that the police were after him and asked about the cut on Josh's hand, Josh said again that he was in North Carolina. But now he said the cut on his hand was from a shattered cereal bowl. Jack didn't know why Josh kept changing his story and also repeating that he was in North Carolina. It's not like any of this affected Jack, since he was already out of town himself. But if Josh thought Jack might tell the investigators about the blood, it made sense that he would tell Jack to make sure he said he was in North Carolina. That way he would relay North Carolina to police, which would throw them off the trail and give Josh enough time to dispose of evidence. Finally, when Jack was asked if he heard anything that night, screams, yells, a struggle, anything, Jack said no. A psychiatrist named Dr. Levy said that consuming marijuana, Xanax, and alcohol in one session could cause a blackout. In blackouts, people can become violent. They can become homicidal. They can want to self-inflict pain and forget their actions in the morning. It's very possible that Jack did hear or do something that night that he couldn't recall. But there was no proof that Jack was involved in a homicide or that he even had any intent to do so when Jenna walked into his apartment. We don't even know if he saw Jenna. None of his DNA was at the crime scene. Just because he had a wild side, took drugs, did not mean he was responsible for what happened in his apartment. I'm sure the knowledge of the murder changed Jack forever. I'm not saying he's entirely innocent here, but in the long run, the evidence doesn't match up. It doesn't show that Jack was responsible for Jenna's murder. And neither was Jenna. In some cases like this, I sadly do see a lot of victim blaming in my comments. Maybe because a woman is social, she goes out in the town. Maybe she has a boyfriend, but she still wants to go out and have fun. Or maybe she dresses a certain way or parties. So, let's not forget who the real monsters are in these cases, the killers. Their actions go above and beyond any apparent flaws a victim could have had that would put them in harm's way. Jenna did go out that night. She drank, but she also tried to call her friends for help. And when no one responded, she probably felt she had no choice other than to go with a stranger who chose to hurt her. Could she have done other things? Sure. Could she have called a cab or a ride share? Yes, but we have no idea what Josh said to her. Maybe those were her intentions at some point. Josh, on the other hand, had his own plans for Jenna. They were both intoxicated to the point of being blacked out. They had actually been overserved by bartenders that night, and Josh had a long criminal record and a history of harassment that culminated in murder. It makes me sad that Jenna, who stood for women's rights, lost her life to a cruel man, the type that she had been warned about. It's evil irony, and it is such a shame. After 9 days of testimony, Joshua was found guilty and given life in prison for murder, on top of a consecutive 9 years for his other 3 charges. He, of course, tried to appeal his sentence because he said the police hadn't gotten the right search warrants or let him consult an attorney when he asked, but his sentence was affirmed. The judge said Jenna's murder was depraved, and her killer deserves every excruciating moment as he spends the rest of his life in Forest County Correctional Facility. Jenna's mom, Jackie, said after the trial, she misses her daughter. Jenna was unapologetically herself. She wanted justice and liberation for all. It's been over 5 years, and Jenna's bedroom still looks the way it did when she went to college. Sometimes Jackie sleeps in Jenna's bed, which makes her feel connected with her daughter's spirit. And my heart hurts for that mama who never got to see her daughter grow up and have a family of her own. Ed felt that justice was served, and he and Jackie went on to sue Pub Webb for overserving Jenna and her friends, which contributed to the circumstances surrounding her murder. They also turned their attention to Jenna's blessing bags, which is still going strong. They host an annual funding event called Designer Purse Bingo. If you are in the Philadelphia area, you should try to go. All year, outside organizations donate or collect supplies to make these blessing bags, and they distribute those backpacks far and wide, working with police to not only bless the people of Philadelphia, but also surrounding cities. You can tell they're Jenna's backpacks from their tags. It's a community effort to honor Jenna's legacy, and I'm so glad that I can contribute to keeping her name alive. I'm going to leave you with Jenna's own words. She once said, quote, "I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. I don't want to just go through the motions in life. I want to help people. I want to stand up for what is right and fight against what's wrong. This world has so much potential and so little being done about it. You can think I'm crazy or ridiculous for thinking I can make an impact, but that's why I will. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." End quote. Thank you so very much for being here and listening to Jenna's story. Please stay safe. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.